So good day, everyone. Thank you for taking time from what I'm sure are busy schedules to join us again for another webinar in our Global Performance Excellence series that we've been doing for I think almost 4 years now. We've done well over 120 webinars on a wide spectrum of topics, all related to organizational team and individual performance excellence. Today we're launching a mini series of webinars that focus on operational analytics. One of the topic areas that we've done quite a bit of work in, and I've sort of labeled this series like college classes were labeled 101, 201, 301, and 401. And modeled sort of after building on some foundations, which is what we'll focus on today. I want to make note of the fact that the Council on Industrial and Systems Engineers is an ongoing sponsor of this series of webinars that we've done, and also for this particular series, the Poirier Group has generously provided time and effort to put this all together for us. So the session looks something like this. I'm going to do a little bit of tee up, and then I'm going to go into the operational analytics foundations conversation with you and talk about frameworks and models and some ways to think about how we build better performance measurement systems and do analytics better. And although I said respond to questions from audience, feel free to use the chat function. I'll be monitoring the chat. I'll be looking at and so, use chat to make observations, make comments, ask questions, and I'll follow that. And then I'll weave in things that you offer and questions that you ask as we go along. And then I'll close out by talking a little bit about what's ahead. I wanted to talk just a little bit about, some of you know me and many of you probably don't, some of the data and experience that serves as the foundation for what I'm going to share with you today. I was, when I was at Ohio State working on my PhD, I worked on a National Science Foundation project that focused on white-collar productivity measurement, which was a big issue back when I was in school. And I actually wrote my first book in 1985, published by John Wiley, titled Productivity Management, Planning, Measurement, and Evaluation, Control, Improvement. So that sort of launched, when I went back to graduate school after working at Eastman Kodak for 3 years, somehow I caught the measurement bug, and I just got really interested in performance measurement from a very broad perspective. And then I went on to teach at Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, and Ohio State, and I was always teaching courses that related to management systems engineering. And so measurement and analytics were always a part of that. And then most recently at Ohio State, from 2007 to 20, I ran the Integrated Lean Sigma Black Belt certification program that they had in that department. I broke away from academia and went out into the private sector to see if I could do a real work in the real world. And I was VP of Business Process Improvement for a global life science company from 2000 to 2007. And so I ran into a lot of very practical, real analytics challenges and problems and issues. We were installing Oracle, so I understand ERP installation, implementation, and how all that lays a foundation for improved ability to do better analytics. And then as I mentioned, at Ohio State, I directed and coached over 250 business process improvement projects in a wide spectrum of industries for a wide range of types of performance problems. And so a lot of what I'm sharing with you is based on that series of experiences that I've had over my career. And I got to say, like the rest of you, I'm still learning more every day. This is a big field and a big topic, and it's changing. It's very dynamic. It's changing all for the better, but tremendous opportunities in the field of performance measurement and analytics. So I'll start with some key points that I'm borrowing from a presentation that the CISC group got when we were at Intel, probably 7 years ago, I guess it was. And I'll let you read through those bullets. And by the way, this webinar is being recorded, and you will have a copy, access to a copy of the presentation. So I'm going to go through things fairly quickly so that we can get things done in the allotted time. And I'll come back to this list of things. So I think first and foremost, good analytics comes from a good understanding of the context within which the measurement work, the analytics work is being done. I think that being a good analyst is an art and a science. There's a bit of both, and it requires business acumen. It requires a good understanding of data management, how you get data, how you store data, how you manage data, and then also how do you convert data into information and ultimately portray it so that it provokes timely decisions and actions. And some people have all those skills. Oftentimes you find people that got part of those skills. And so many times we've got teams, eclectic teams that are good at one aspect of analytics. And so getting those teams to work together sometimes can be a challenge. What I found is that if you invest in the right data foundation, regardless of whether it's a small Lean Sigma DMAIC project or if it's a big balanced scorecard for an enterprise, if you invest in the right data foundation and you really think through the data model, it has a very strong positive return on investment. So making sure that you get the right data foundation is important, and we'll talk more about that as we go through the session today, and then when we get into 201. The good data visualizations, we're going to talk about this more in 201 and 301, but good data visualizations that can tell a story quickly is really critical, because most leaders and managers that I've experienced, they learn visually, and so they're attracted to things that are easy to understand, pictures, graphs, charts that are easy to understand, and that create what I call aha moments for them. The other thing that I've seen in the organizations we work with is that analytics teams don't have to be big. You can have fairly small analytics teams with some very talented people that can have a disproportionate influence on a bottom line. And so to some extent, that's one of the things that I guess I'm proposing, is that every organization should be building a small tiger team of analytics experts that can drive improved performance measurement, improved analytics, improved visualizations that, again, provoke timely decisions and actions at all levels, vertically and horizontally in the organization. So I think I like this slide in the sense that when we think about analytics, it's a big topic. I mean, we hear about big data, we hear about AI, machine learning. I think everybody says we should be measuring more. You hear people say we're data rich and information poor, we're data poor. Measurement matters. Yep, measurement matters. Let's jump on the analytics bandwagon. Let's improve accountability by using better measurement. And then we get into the complexity of, okay, all these things that we need and we want, and we aspire to, and we hear other people have and we don't have. Then we get into the complexity of, okay, now how do I make it happen? So we've got books called Measure What Matters. We've got balanced scorecards. We've got KPIs. We got analytics. We got big data. We got ERP systems. We got Power BI, Tableau, Chat GPT, AI, and on and on and on and on. And so things get very complex, and I think people get confused about where do I start, and how do I really do a better job of engineering management systems? How do I do a better job of engineering visible measurement systems that support ongoing improvement? And so we need clear, succinct problem statements. We need a vision for what can be as it relates to analytics. We need a strategic pathway, and we need a migration plan. And that's what I'm going to be talking about how we with you today. So what we want to do is avoid the muddle, right? So a lot of times we start off and we say, okay, we're going to have an OpEx program, we're going to have an op analytics program, and then we get into it and we get all wrapped around the axle on things. So OA 101 is what I put together for you is things that I think are foundational to the way you think about and you approach building better measurement systems and doing analytics better. And so I'm going to focus on what's called the management systems model and what I would call management systems engineering. When I want to contrast management systems engineering from engineering management. I don't mean engineering management. I don't mean the management of engineering. I mean the engineering of management systems. That's what I mean by management systems engineering. So how do we do a better job designing, developing, implementing, and installing management systems that are more effective and that drive franchise value better, faster than we're currently doing it. And so I'll walk you through this as we go forward with the rest of this hour. In 201, I'm going to focus on what I call the operational analytics triangle model. I'm going to zoom in more on what I call the data management role and the analyst role. And so I'll talk more about that today and tee that up for that next session. And then 301, we'll get into detailed design and development. How do we actually build better performance measurement systems that embed better analytics into them and actually drive the kinds of results that we're after? So we'll talk more about the complete set of components that you have to put together in order to drive better ideal behaviors and drive improved performance using improved performance measurement systems and analytics. And then at 401, we're going to talk about best practices, and I've got the chief data and analytics officer from University Health Network in Toronto. They've done a great job of building out their analytics program, so he's going to come in and talk with you. He and an associate are going to come in and talk with you about what they've been doing there. And then 501 and 601, which Jared Frederici is going to help me with, still on the drawing board. We're going to really start to get into advanced tools to support best-in-class operational analytics. So for those of you that are tool fans, we'll get into tool time in that session. So one of the things that I'll start off by saying, and I think it's maybe intuitively obvious, but is that you can't really be a good job being an analyst if you don't do systems thinking. So good analytics really comes from understanding patterns of behavior, understanding system structures, and then changing mental models. I've got this in a little bit later in the thing, but one of my favorite movies is Moneyball. I read the book and I saw the movie, and I watched the movie just the other day, and I was just intrigued by how much insight there was in that movie around this picture, because the guy that was the analyst, well, first of all, the coach, the head coach, and the analyst were really buddies together, and they were really changing mental models. They were changing the way people think about how you pick baseball players and how you build a team when you're an Oakland Athletics team or you're a Cleveland Indian team. I still call them the Indians, and you're not a New York Yankees team and you don't have a big budget. How do you beat the big guys? How do you beat the good guys? You have to rethink your system structures and mental models. So, and everything that we've been doing in this webinar series is really focused on the integration of people, strategy, process, and technology. And in that pursuit of performance excellence, by doing a better job integrating those four major components of an organizational system, operational analytics is really the central nervous system and the brain behind that integration. It really is that intelligent system that tells us how are we doing in terms of doing a better job of integrating these four things as we move forward, doing what our organizations do. The other thing I think we've got to make, operational analytics has to begin with the end in mind. So everything that you do is always got to be aimed on how is the analytics that I'm doing, how are the questions that I'm attempting to answer, how is the measurement that I'm developing, how is it going to create enterprise value, shareholder value. And so I throw this up, and I know you can't read it, but it's called the Deloitte Enterprise Value Map. And you can Google this, and you can find readable images that you can zoom in and actually read those little green and black and yellow and red things. But basically, when I was at Ohio State, and we did for 13 years, and we did the lean integrated Lean Sigma projects, business process improvement projects, each of the students had to go in and identify on their project which of these levers, which of these things was their project pushing on, and how did their project create enterprise value. So that this was a way of almost building the business case. And so you can actually pick projects on the basis of identifying which of these columns and which of these sort of elements underneath those columns are the most broken. These colors, by the way, represent business process groupings. So the greens are one specific type of business process. The blues are another type of business process. And so we can actually do an assessment, use this model to do an assessment, and also analyze how our projects are actually causally creating value in the organization. So if you think about in the private sector, for sure, if you think about what is enterprise value, one way to think about it is this cube concept. And so the x-axis of the cube is the number of customer relationships. The y-axis is the value of those relationships, and the z-axis is the stickiness of the relationship, how durable the relationship is. And my point to this slide is that there's at least three ways for an organization to improve enterprise value, franchise value. One is to position, is what I call the positioning strategy. And the second is value exchange optimization. So loyalty programs would be one way to think about a value exchange optimization. I give you this, you give me this. And then OpEx, which is the last column on the right, is the most traditional column that industrial engineers tend to play in. Quality, efficiency, productivity, and so forth, quality work life. My point is that the domain of industrial and systems engineering and operational analytics is extremely broad. It's pervasive. It cuts across the entire enterprise. So there's not any aspect of the enterprise, to include the extended enterprise, suppliers and customers, that operational analytics isn't important in. And the reason I threw this slide in, the slide on the left is straight out of Jim Collins' book, Built to Last and then Good to Great. And so what Jim Collins said is, if you do things, so he found 18 great companies, visionary companies, and that's how they performed from 1926 to 1990. The comparison for every one of the great visionary companies, he found a comparison company. So for Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, for Marriott, Hilton, and so forth. And so you can see that the visionary companies, and then he studied what did they do? How did they do that? How did they do that? And he talks about it in his book. Well, David Poirier and I worked with a company called Loblaws back in the early 90s, and we did a strategic transformation of the organization, and we were able to produce exactly the same results. We took stock price from $6 in 92 to $60 just after the turn of the century. And we were basically just replicating the model. We basically said a great management system, in order to achieve greatness, in order to achieve visionary levels of performance, you do these things. And we just put those things in place. So the end game is to do this, is to grow franchise value, make this curve happen. And if you follow the roadmap, if you learn from everything everything that's been written, everything that's been researched, everything that's been studied, if you if you consolidate all that and you figure out what the program looks like, you can replicate that program and you can create these results in your organization. So the purpose of operational analytics and analysts is to facilitate and enable the creation of solutions that enable better decisions faster and then drive actions, improvement implementation faster, and then drive benefits realization faster. That is the desired and positive outcomes that we want, and then grow enterprise value. So I know that's a lot of words, and I know that's a complex sentence, maybe overly complex, but I think you can't lose sight of the fact that the end game is ultimately analytics has got to drive these things. Analytics has got to support the growth of the cube. Think of it as growing the cube. There's white space, right? So go from 1x to 10x to 25x. So let's talk about some fundamental questions. So when I taught the students the Integrated Lean Sigma Black Belt course, it was really a lot broader than just teaching Lean Sigma. But fundamentally, I said, hey, what this course is all about is we want to understand. So there's a system or process that's in focus. That it could be the whole organization. So when David and I were working at Loblaws, we were literally focused on Loblaws, and then we zeroed in on finance, and we zeroed in on supply chain. But so those are units of analysis, and so you can zoom in and zoom out on the unit of analysis. Once you've decided what unit of analysis, what's the system of interest, what's the system that you're working to fix, then the question is, how does that system work? How does it perform? How do we make it perform better? How does it need to perform? So all these questions that I listed here in the green box here, what are the right systems, subsystems, business processes that we should be focusing on? What is our business's optimal portfolio? That's a very fundamental question that I'm not sure many organizations really sit down and say, this is our optimal portfolio. This is the optimal portfolio at the enterprise level. This is what we should be doing in HR. This is what we should be doing in finance. This is what we should be doing in this revenue generating business unit. So what aligns best to our good strategy? And I'm using the word good strategy in the context of this book that David Poirier's got me reading, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's a really interesting book. Lots of research been done, lots of great examples. So when I use the word good strategy, I mean it in the context of the way that author defines what constitutes good strategy. And so there's lots of ways to create the right portfolio. When we went into a Kroger bakery, for example, we were looking for constraints or pain points, or we were looking for bottlenecks. And so we would tackle bottlenecks. Yeah, the book is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Yep. And you can get it on Amazon. If you just Google that, you'll find it. So then the question is, how does the focal system, how does the system or process that we're interested in, how does it work? And then how does it perform? That's the focus of operational analytics. And then how do we best improve performance as we've operationally defined it? That's sort of like in the DMAIC model, that's sort of like little m, big A, big I, little c, if you think about it. And then is enterprise value growing, and how do we know? So as a result of the work that we've done, we've identified the factors that we need to change to improve performance. How has that rippled? What's the ripple effect? How has that causally created more enterprise value? So those were the four fundamental questions that guided the students as they were preparing to go into an insurance company, a hospital, an automobile subassembly factory. And so the management systems model is something that I've been working with and thinking about and using for many years, introduced to me by Harold Kerstead at Virginia Tech when I first joined Virginia Tech in 1984. It's an interesting model. I mean, it's not that complex, and I don't think it's that profound. After all, it's just a framework, so it doesn't really do anything other than it helps me structure the way I think about approaching analytics and approaching engineering the engineering of management systems. So this is the whole chalupa. That's the model. And so you've got the three components: what's being managed, who's managing in the upper left-hand corner, and what am I managing with, so to speak, over in the right-hand corner. And then you've got these interfaces. You've got data capture, data entry. You've got information portrayal, information perception, and then you've got the people that are accountable for the system that we're looking at, the leadership and management team. They're making decisions, taking actions aimed at making that thing do better. And then we capture more data, longitudinal data, and we find out that the things that we changed, did they make a difference, right? So that's the model. So when you think about the extended enterprise, it could be the extended enterprise. When you think about what the bottom part of that model is, it depends on what you're doing. It depends on what your role is, right? If you're the CEO, then it's probably the extended enterprise. It's the suppliers, it's the logistics system that gets stuff into the system that goes out. It could be an organizational unit, so it could be finance. It could be finance. It could be finance. Excuse me, I got somebody outside spraying something. It could be finance. It could be a revenue generating business unit. It could be supply chain. It could be an extended value stream. So it could be a business process. In other words, begins with the customer, ends with the customer, like order fulfillment, for example. So it could be a business process that cuts across functions, cuts across the verticals in the organization, so to speak. And then it could be a little domain project. It could be an embedded value stream or a process or a sub-process. So what I'm walking you through can be useful regardless of the size of the system that you're focused on. And so the methods and the tools that we use in the first step in this process, you can use SIPOC, so supplier, input, process, output, control, end-to-end value stream mapping, business process breakdown structure, IDEF, some of you are familiar with IDEF, observe, walk the process, structured interview. So a lot of times my students, if they were in a factory, if they weren't in a transactional process that was sort of broken up and in lots of different places, you walk the front to the back and you get a sense of how the workflows happen. Butcher block or Miro, the value stream, or the swim lane. And then, once you've got paper and pencil versions and an understanding of how the system or process works, then we can start to codify that. We can start to get that into like Visio, and we can make it smart. So we can use layering. So we can layer failure modes on top of the Visio workflows, and we can show them or not show them. So we can get really fancy in terms of using some of the technology that's available to us today. So these are just examples of methods and tools that can be used. This is something I did with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I just had, this was back during COVID time, and so we were doing Microsoft Team calls, and I would have this particular system is this unit within Big Brothers Big Sisters is they get mentors, they recruit mentees, and then they evaluate those mentors and mentees, and then they match those mentors and mentees together into a dyad, a mentor and a mentee, and then there's a caseworker that works with that mentor-mentee team, and that mentor-mentee team can exist for a year, can exist for 10 years, and then at some point the mentee graduates and they go off and they live a fulfilling life, and maybe they come back and they become a mentor. So that's the process. That's what we're doing here, and we work with them. The Poirier Group does purpose beyond profit projects, and so 25% of our bench time we deploy to working with not-for-profits in the Greater Toronto area, and Big Brothers Big Sisters has been one of the organizations we've worked with. And so they had a big problem. They had 1,000 mentees that needed to be mentored, and they were only servicing, they were only able to provide mentors for about 220 of those for the past 10 years. And so they wanted us to help them figure out how to change the process so that they went from 220 closer to 1,000. It took somewhere between 12 and 24 months to match a mentor to a mentee. So the lead time in the matching process was terrible. So what we did is we sat down with everybody and we went sort of from left to right and we interviewed people and we just started to create, this is like paper and pencil, like butcher block that we're doing it on Miro. And we just started to put the process together. So we just mapped out the flow. And then we started to think about what are the buffers. So we started to think about how many mentors and mentees at any point in time, if you took a snapshot, how many are at the spot in the process. So we're starting to introduce lean thinking. We're starting to understand buffers, understand where the bottlenecks are, where the constraints are. We're also starting to analyze, and we converted that into a simulation model so that we could actually simulate and say, if this thing has to pop out, if this thing has to have steady state, have 1,000 things in process at any given point in time, how does this have to work? So we can do all kinds of what ifs. I'm just using this as an example of the work that we did, what real examples look like. This was a picture of I mentioned Kroger. This is a picture of the project we did on a cookie line. We did a value stream map end to end of this, maybe it was a saltine cracker line. And all of these data boxes, the data didn't exist. So as we were mapping out how does it work, we were starting to identify, okay, the next question I've got to answer is, how does it perform? And so then that triggers the question, well, where's the data? Do I have the data to answer the question, how does it perform? And so the answer was no. So then we had to figure out, how do we get the data? And once we did that, we could figure out where the yield loss was taking place. Up until that point in time, all they knew was rolled throughput yield loss. They knew that they had scrap, but they just measured it at the end of the line. So they knew the total amount of scrap, but they didn't know where the scrap was actually being produced. So we weren't able to really rifle solutions to the problem. And I'm just throwing these out. These are just a couple of examples of the, how does it work? How does it work? And then how that naturally leads us into how does it perform? So with Big Brothers Big Sister, by helping them learn to see and understand with simple value stream maps, the cross-functional team started to understand where the process was breaking down and why for 10 years it had been underperforming. And by introducing the concept of flow and getting the buffers, which is a good thing, buffers are a good thing, and bottlenecks, which are cues, which are a bad thing, to get the buffers right so that we get better flow, and to get those adjusted properly, they were able to increase the primary Y. The number of served mentees increased by 30% with no added resources to the process. All we did was just introduce a couple of really simple things, help them learn to see, and then start to talk to them about how they have to establish the right level of flow so that they can serve more mentees. At the same time, we were able to reduce the lead time from match to initial meeting came down from 24 months to about 12 months, and it's continuing to improve. The target is 4 months. So this isn't a particularly complex system, but I used it, I'm sharing it just because the principles and methods and tools that I'm talking to you about today were sort of verified in a simple example. So you can see how it plays out. And if you can see how it plays out in a simple example, then you can take it and you can apply it in more complex systems like the ones that you probably live in. So one of the things that I do is when you're doing this model, you're going to work the model clockwise. So you're going to sort of build the model clockwise. So you're going to start down at the bottom, and then we're going to go up clockwise. We're going to go up to the leadership and management team. And what I'm going to do up there is I'm going to find out who are the critical stakeholders, who are the people that are responsible and accountable, who lead and manage and work in this system that I'm working to, that I need to make better. And I want to understand what are their needs and requirements, particularly from an information perspective. So I want to understand what is their strategy? Do they have a strategy for making this thing better? If so, what are the levers that they're pushing to make this system or this process get better? Or is it just we're just running it, we're fighting fires, we're running it, and we're just keeping our heads above water, and we're not really working to improve it, we're just running it. So if that's the situation, then we got a different situation to deal with. So I want to know who are the executive sponsors. I want to know who the value stream owner is. I want to know who the process owners are. I want to know what the roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and authorities are, what we call the R2A2s. I want to know what teams and individuals on the team, what are their information requirements? What do they want to know that they don't know? What are the unanswered questions? What are the things that if they had a better understanding of, they could do a better job managing and improving the process that they're accountable for? What's holding them back from making more timely, better adjustments that will improve performance? So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at as I move from, now that I understand how the system that I'm working to improve performs, works, I understand how it works. Now I'm coming up to the people that are accountable for making it work and making it work better. And I'm asking them, what is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to know that you don't know? So I'm getting there, I'm pulling their information requirements out of them. So I'm going to skip through that for a second. So once I've done that, once I've understood what they would like to see, what they want to know that they don't know, then and by the way, one of the questions that I'm asking them is not only what do you want to see, but how do you prefer to see it? So I want to know if they have preferences for how they see how they get presented data and facts, how they get presented information. Are there better or worse ways to help them understand what's happening? So that's that specifying what the information portrayal requirements or expectations or needs are. Once I've done that, now I can continue to come around clockwise, and I can come around and I can say, okay, the information requirements are this. They'd like to be able to answer these questions. They want to know these things. What are the data elements that are required in order to provide that information? So that's where I'm coming around to the data capture, data entry. So what data are available? What data do I need that's not available? And how do I get that data? Which is oftentimes a real situation. Many times people want to understand things, and there are data requirements that simply aren't being met by the data capture system in the organization. So the simplest causal model that I can think about in terms of introducing the notion of a data model is Y is a function of X. So Y is your primary Y is, so for example, with Big Brothers Big Sisters, the primary Y was number of mentees served and lead time to get a mentee served. There were two Ys, Y1 and Y2. So then the question becomes, what are the X's? What are the factors? What are the variables? What are the levers in the process upstream of mentees being paired and starting to get served, mentees starting to get served, and total number of mentees that we can serve? What are the factors that I have to manage better in order to get those Ys to go from 220 to 320 to 420 to 520, from 24 months to 12 months to 4 months? That's what we had to think through. And then the question is, okay, I've got that figured out. I've got that causal model figured out. Now, how do I portray those X's such that people can see how the X's are managing? Because you measure and monitor the Y's, you measure and manage the X's. Does that make sense? So the dilemma in most organizations is they try to measure and manage the Y's. It's difficult to do that, if not impossible. So we've got to figure out the X's, the factors that are literally causally driving and causing the Y to behave the way it's behaving. And then the U's are the factors or measures that are unknown and unmeasured. And that's, as an analyst, that's what I'm wanting to surface, because that's the additional data capture that I've somehow got to figure out how to do. I got to go out and do work sampling. I got to go out and do observational time studies. I got to go out and I got to find, and a lot of times it's that the data is not at the right level of granularity for you. Because when the ERP system was set up, they didn't capture data. So I've got 11 control points in my value stream. And when the ERP system was set up, it only captured data at 3 of the 11 control points. So I've got 8 control points where I'm not getting any data. That's what happened at the Kroger's. They didn't set up the data capture system in a way that supported the optimization of the performance of that line. So if when they started, they said, we want to optimize yield loss, we want to minimize yield loss, they would have set the measurement system up differently if they thought about it, but they didn't think about it. So the U's are a big component of when I build my business model. And you know, this Y as a function of X stuff can get complex. So on the lower left-hand corner, that's a systems dynamics model. We built a systems dynamics model for it was a restaurant quality Asian food frozen food processing plant, and we were modeling inventory levels. So inventory levels were too high, and we were modeling what was driving the inventory levels, what was causing the inventory, what were the balancing loops, what were the reinforcing loops that were causing inventory to be too high. It was a fairly complex exercise. Once we did it, though, we got tremendous insights around what levers, what were the most effective levers that we could push to get inventory to the right level. So I like this slide, and I'll stop and I'll talk about this a little bit. I'm skipping over some of the slides, but you can look at those, and if you've got questions, you can get back to me. But so really, when we do analytics, we're really moving from, in some respects, big data. One of the keynote speakers at the IISE conference in New Orleans, from the University of Michigan, Industrial and Operations Management Department, Judy Jen, she talked about data fusion, and it was a really interesting presentation because I never thought about data fusion quite as broadly as she did. But you've got sensor data, you got public data, you got structured data, you got unstructured data, and then you got this big question mark: unknown, unmeasured, unthought about data that we need to solve the performance problems that we've got. And so as we go through this funnel and we're filtering out the data, we've got decreasing volume of content to deal with as a result of focusing in on a specific system and specific problems. And we've got increasing quality of content. That's what we found at Kroger. So as we got more focused and better understood what our data requirements were and what our analytics requirements were to achieve optimal levels of scrap, minimized levels of scrap, it actually got we actually experienced the data analytics funnel. We had less data to think about in many respects, and there was less complexity. We were more focused and clear around what we had to do to get the primary Y to behave the way we wanted it to behave. So this is what we're going to talk about in the next in 201. This is the operational analytics triangle model, and we're going to talk about the foundational data role. So we'll zoom in more on my conversation around getting the right data, building the data model. And then we'll talk also more about the above the line role, above that blue line. The analyst role, we'll talk about what feature extraction, knowledge extraction, and then ultimately, how do we create better visualizations? And I got this yellow brick road thing in here only because, you know, the one neat thing about DMAIC or DCDOV or Design for Lean Sigma is that it's a roadmap to follow. And so everybody in their head, when I say DMAIC, define, they sort of know what define means. This is, you do these things, and then measure, you do these things. So what I'm doing in operational analytics is creating a DMAIC of sorts, creating a roadmap for you to follow so that it's easier for you. Now, you can add, you can subtract, you can dummy it down, you can simplify it, whatever you want to do. But what I think I've thought through is the high level steps that we've got to do in order to more systematically, more thoughtfully create performance measurement systems and do a better job with analytics. And you know, somebody mentioned this in large organizations. A lot of time, you know, this is what data looks like in a lot of organizations. It's scattered. Even organizations that have a CRM system or ERP system, there's still tons of data out there that that are often important, and so therefore need to somehow get extracted and integrated and to be able to be used. I'm just going to use this as an example. I mean, a lot of organizations are using, you know, Microsoft 360. They're using Power BI, and we actually did that for Big Brothers Big Sisters. We actually put all their data from Microsoft Dynamics into Power BI and created dashboards for them and reports that they can then slice and dice the data and get get answers to questions that they before we did this for them, they couldn't do it. So you know, this is what we had a capstone senior design project that we did with them, and so we took Microsoft Dynamics 365 stuff, we took Excel data, and we put it into Power BI, and then we created a visual information system. And so this is an example, an actual screenshot of some of the data that the report that we've generated, and they can go in and they can, with a click of a button, they can look at snapshots, or they can look at longitudinal charts that show them how this stuff is changing over time. And it's like been a revolution for them. It's just incredible. So now ending this up here. So I know this is busy and complex, but what we're basically going to do in 201 is we're going to talk about how you can take that Intel Analytics triangle, which remember the bottom half of the triangle, so the part that's over there, that's the data management role. So that's all, what are the questions I'm trying to answer? What data do I need to answer the questions? How do I get the data? How do I bring the data into something, organize it, integrate it, get it laid out in a way that if I sit Minitab on top of my database, Minitab wants the data to look a certain way. So I've got to get the data organized so that Minitab can do what it does, right? And I can create some cool charts in Minitab, just as an example. So then coming around the corner, so rounding the corner. So as I said, you build this thing clockwise and you run it counterclockwise. So the process is performing, and as the process performs, we're capturing data from control points. So those explosions are data capture with suppliers, data capture with transportation, data capture inside the process, data capture outbound, data capture downstream customers. And so all that data capture is being rolled into a data warehouse or data warehouses that then I'm going to merge into databases that allow me to do analytics on specific types of problems that I'm attempting to solve. And so we're running this thing counterclockwise. It runs, I capture the data, I portray the information, real-time dashboard. Scorecard is like every month you see a chart change. Dashboard visualizations are every day the chart's different. Live feeds. So, so then the leadership team starts to learn how to use better information. It provokes them, it motivates them, it enables them to make adjustments faster, quicker. And so what we really are wanting to do is decrease by building better measurement systems, by thinking them through, by systematically walking through a process like I've outlined for you today. We can decrease the latency meaning the lag, the lead time, the cycle time. We can decrease the cycle time to capture the data. So from the business event to the time when I've got the data captured about that event, that shrinks. The analytics, the analysis latency, that shrinks. The decision-making latency, that shrinks. The implementation latency, maybe that shrinks. Because we've still got to be able to make adjustments, change things, which sometimes can be slow. And then, so all these latencies, by systematically engineering management systems and analytic systems, we can shrink these latencies, and that's the essence of what we want to do, because speed's important. Your competition is getting fast at this. We need to continue to build our ability to be fast at this. So I'll stop. I'll go through these key points again. So these were the 6 key points that I made. So, and I'm just going to do some sub-highlighting, so to speak, peel the onion back just a little bit more. So, so first of all, analysts need to have an all-access pass to data and facts, and the wisdom and intentionality to make sure that their data models are robust, and to make sure that they've been innovative and creative in thinking about where to get data, because sometimes it's spread out in a lot of places. So when we did projects at MDS, we had an IT rep. We called him a bit rep. We had finance reps, we had money belts, and we had bit belts. And the job of the IT person was to help us understand not just what was in the ERP system, but to understand within a business unit, where are other data? Where's other data reside, and how do we get that? And I'm just going to highlight a couple of these sub bullets here. Simple techniques trump complex techniques. I think that universities, I've spent so for the past 12 years, CISE visits a different university department, ISE department. And so we've been to Arizona State, Northwestern, North Carolina State, Georgia Tech. And we always get insights around what they're doing with analytics. And a lot of universities, analytics is housed in engineering, is housed in industrial engineering. Oftentimes it's a joint program between CIS and industrial engineering. And I think sometimes we've overcomplicated it. And it's at least from an operational analytics perspective. In terms of 2, I think, you know, there's little time for craft in our business. Speed wins, which means that, again, creating people who are naturals at this, creating people who are naturally have natural instincts about how to do analytics, and putting them into a team, like we said before, can create significant ROI for an organization. So, and analytics isn't generally being taught, in my experience, at least not taught the way I think it should be from an operations improvement perspective. So again, 3rd point, as I mentioned, positive ROI for investment in data foundations. You know, the rules for data management today, storage and speed are generally not issues anymore. If it's there, store it, right? You might need it later. So generally getting more data, when you configure an ERP system, get more data, make it as granular as you can get it, because you might need it. And so, and again, it doesn't cost anything to store it. And The other thing, again, is I think that and we'll talk more about this in 201, have to keep things simple for our customers. We've got to be able to present the results of our work in a way that doesn't drag them through the mud and makes it easy for them to get the insights. So we're going to torture the data. And a lot of times what I find is young analysts really like to, tell me what you did, tell me how you did what you did. And all I want to know is I just want to know the answer. I just want to know what should I be doing differently. So I think, again, simplicity rules, cutting to the quick, don't drag people through the mud. Make sure that you've portrayed your insights that you've gotten from the data in a way that's easy for people to understand and act on. I'm going to pick things up here because we're running out of time, but I just want to. So what I've done is I've taken each of those 6 points and I've sort of fleshed them out just a little bit more for you. So you can read through those. And as I said, if you have questions, just feel free to reach out and ask me and I'll clarify. So with the last 4 minutes here, what's ahead is on the 27th, we're going to do Operational Analytics 201. Then on the 14th, and I know I got these out of order, but I was able to get the University Health Network of Toronto on the 14th of July, so I booked them in, and that's so 401 is going to be out of order with 301, but that's okay. It'll work out okay. And then all this series will be capstoned by a feature article in the ISE magazine in August. So if you stick with this series, thank you for joining today. If you stick with the series, you can earn an operational analytics certificate with CEUs from IISE. You might want to consider the IISE's operational analytics certification, which takes what I shared today to another level and really starts to work on skill development. If you're interested in learning more about that certification, you can contact James Swisher. And I do have a slide where I put in some of those books that I talked about today, and then some additional books that I referenced or didn't reference, but you can look at that. So this will all be the recording and the presentation will be posted on the IISE website, and it's in the IISE training webinars section, and you'll get an email from Zoom tomorrow that will have the link that'll take you right to where the recording and the presentation is. So thanks again for joining. Appreciate your time today, and I hope that my remarks were helpful for you. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.